So I was asked to do a video on Kaitou Joker, and I ended up watching all 4 seasons and reading some of the manga. The manga itself wasn't really worth reading, and I ended up dropping it after a few chapters. The anime, however, was a bit more enjoyable, so here's a video on it. Kaitou Joker, Mysterious Joker, or simply just Joker, is a story about a phantom thief named Joker, obviously, and his apprentice Hachi, stealing treasures from around the world. As a phantom thief, he gives advance notice that he's going to steal an item, making it more into a game or a challenge, rather than a typical heist, giving them time to prepare to stop him. The anime starts off as a fairly repetitive kid show, where all the episodes are just one-off stories with the same general structure. Joker announces that he's going to steal an item, he infiltrates the place, a third party intervenes sometimes, or something unexpected happens. Somehow he succeeds making a miracle happen, and then obtaining the treasure. The first few episodes hold this exact structure, and honestly I was losing interest really fast, as it just isn't the type of anime that I usually enjoy watching, and it being targeted at children wasn't helping either. I thought I would have to force myself to finish the first season alone, but there's a bit more to it than just that. The show has a slow build-up to any actual overarching plot, with a lot of the episodes being mostly unrelated heists that are used to introduce and build up characters and their relationships. There are 2 main arcs across the 4 seasons, with season 1 and 2 revolving around the antagonist, Professor Clover, who is my personal favorite antagonist of the show, where he tricks and deceives characters in order to obtain the ability to control time and steal all of the world's treasures. And the 3rd and 4th season being about President D, trying to eliminate the Phantom Thieves for his own personal reasons, and an alien who wants to return home, while people are trying to capture him for immortality. There are 3 main Phantom Thieves throughout the story, and each of them have their own apprentice or companion. Joker is the main protagonist of the series. Having lost both of his parents at a very young age, he was left alone to protect their treasures from numerous criminals. He ended up meeting a phantom thief named Silverheart, who had sent notice that he was planning on stealing the time-telling goddess from him. But instead he wound up saving Joker from Professor Clover. Joker then basically forced his way into the care and apprenticeship of Silverheart, declaring that he has decided to become a cool phantom thief just like him. Joker is extremely smart and confident in himself, while also downplaying all of his abilities, often to throw off his opponents. He tends to play around a lot, usually pretending to be the underdog in any given conflict after he's already secured the victory, long before anybody else has realized. Joker's apprentice, Hachi, is my favorite out of all of the protagonists. He is a clumsy ninja that often messes up during heists and causes a lot of problems. But he becomes increasingly confident in himself and his abilities as time goes on. He met Joker in the first episode while trying to retrieve a treasure that was taken from his village in order to return it. Initially, Joker doesn't want Hachi to stay, but eventually comes around when he realizes how good he is at cooking and cleaning. Spade is Joker's main rival throughout the series. Having also lost his parents at a very young age, he was taken in by a rich family where he was subject to abuse by their child Dump, who seems like a generic spoiled rich kid at first, but has a lot more to him the more you learn later on. Spade's apprentice Darkeye is an interesting character who lives 2 completely different lives and cares very much for Spade. I also just think that they have a really cool design. Queen is the last of the main trio that we meet, and just like the other 2, she also lost her parents at a very young age, being only a baby when they were killed. I think all of these characters have something very similar in common. Queen's parents asked Silverheart to save her, and he proceeded to take and raise her under a different name as a phantom thief, to provide extra protection from anyone trying to cause her harm. Queen's companion is a talking dog named Rocco, who was originally an experiment from an animal lab, but ended up escaping. All 3 of the Phantom Thieves were basically raised and taught by Silverheart, who has a trick bag. He is essentially the cool grandpa who teaches you how to steal. All 3 of them use similar weapons and gadgets throughout their heists, with the most important one being Image Gum, which is essentially a perfect disguise, and another being Balloon Gum, which, based off of the name, it's a balloon. They also use a deck of playing cards for various reasons. Sometimes they work as knives, and other times they're just used to blind people. They also have individual weapons, with Joker being more of a creative type. He likes to invent his own gadgets to use, while Spade uses a freezing gun, and Queen uses a diamond sword. Some other characters of note are Shadow, his sister Rose, and then Phoenix. Shadow and Rose are mostly involved in the first and second season's plot, while Phoenix is specifically involved in the third and fourth season. There are also two minor antagonists throughout the entire show. Inspector Oniyama, who has an unhealthy obsession with trying to catch Joker, and Mr. Canary, who is the main collector of treasures that usually gets robbed. Both characters are extremely over the top and specifically used for comedic reasons, but it sometimes gets quite repetitive. I thought each of the characters introduced were really interesting and had some pretty cool designs. None of them really felt too flat, and all of them had decent backstory and actual reasons for their actions, aside from Professor Clover's reason being left rather ambiguous, but his character just really works for me. Overall, I think the characters in general were one of the strongest points of the show. It also really surprised me how much the show itself held my attention. There were episodes that I really didn't care about and thought I didn't want to continue watching, but then the next episode it would pull me right back in. It had a weird way of being both repetitively boring and being extremely interesting at the same time. The first and the third season were definitely the ones that I struggled to get through the most, but they were necessary to build up the characters and ideas of each arc. The last few episodes of season 2 and 4 were where I was the most invested in the story and genuinely wanted to know what was going on and how everything was going to turn out. As for the writing in general, the comedy wasn't too oversaturated for what the story was, being mostly a comedy anime for children, but it never strayed away from the more dramatic story elements, creating a weird balance between the two genres, which I didn't hate, but I would have preferred it to be less comedy-driven. Moving on to the art style, it wasn't an awful art style, but it wasn't amazing either. It is more cartoon-like than most animes in general, which is understandable because it is directed at children, and it did give me a lot of nostalgia initially, being very reminiscent to shows I used to watch in the mornings before school. But the art style just isn't for everyone. I'm not a big fan of it, but it did work really well with the show, in my opinion. As a kid, I probably would have loved this show more than anything, but unfortunately I'm not a kid, and I think the show is above average. I definitely enjoyed it more than I hated it, but does that make it worth a recommendation? It's debatable. It's definitely a show I would leave on in the background while doing other things and half watch, but going out of my way to watch it and actually pay attention doesn't seem like something I would seek out again. There's a bunch of shows I would rather watch over it, but there's even more shows that I would avoid. Had it not been for the repetitive nature of the show, I would have enjoyed it so much more, but with each episode being about a single treasure and not much else, it really felt like they were doing the same thing over and over with just different settings. I think they probably could have cut out half of the episodes, and it would have been just as good of a show, if not better. The actual plot and character designs were really good, but I don't think that's enough to make this show anything more than above average. At the very least, Kaitou Joker wasn't as bad as I expected. Thanks for watching.